Life is hard, and there are a million voices and distractions coming in from every direction. But the voice that matters most is God's. Join us as we discuss God's Word and how that applies to our everyday lives. It's time to dive in. So, girl, listen up. Hi, guys. Welcome to Girl Listen Up, a podcast put on by Built Up Ministries, where we get to speak from and to women just about the unique challenges we face today. My name's Janae, and sitting next to me is Melissa.
Hey guys, thanks again for listening or watching wherever you do to be able to consume this content. We're really excited. Again, we like to talk about the podcast for people from our own personal experience, but also be able to have people who mentor, teach, love on others, and be able to actually take this content and give to others to teach them as well.
Yes, and today's episode is on rest from busyness.
Yes, so girl, listen up. We're talking about rest. So Janae, I know for me, this is a very convicting podcast as we prepared for it because I am not great at rest. So what about you? Like, how do you like when we talked about rest? What do you think we're going to be diving into and those kind of things?
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned like rest from busyness, and I think that today the culture is very much busy, and like if you aren't busy, you're almost seen as lazy.
Yes.
So that's kind of where it's like that kind of conflicts. And then for me, I just have a hard time saying no because I don't want to disappoint people.
Yes, I completely agree with that too. I think that this, like you said, the world glorifies busyness. If you are busy, that means you're important. And it's not always the case, at least that I've seen. Just because you're busy doesn't mean you're that much of important, or sometimes even the ability to rest, we're not resting well. I get caught in the doom scroll. What about you?
Oh, I've definitely done that. My morning routine is so bad of where sometimes I wake up, and for me to actually wake up, I have to be on my phone. But thank goodness I got a dog because now I actually have to get up to let him go outside. So I
Yes.
gotta help fix that. But I think I didn't really know how to rest well. And that's kind of where I got myself into, I don't want to say trouble, but I definitely had a burnout season this past summer. And it was a kind of a combination of me not knowing how to say no. And I was trying to do so many, like, just different things. And I just didn't give myself space to rest. So I didn't have energy to do anything that I actually wanted to do, like spend time with family or like do anything
Yeah.
of my hobbies. And so I just felt like really drained, and I did not have a good attitude a couple of times just because I was so like drained.
Yeah. Rest is extremely important. I know we're going to talk more about it as we dive into the podcast today. But I have that kind of the same experiences. Like I said, I feel convicted by this episode because it's easy for me to choose not to rest because I do have a high demanding job. I do have a lot of things I want to accomplish in my life, from volunteering to doing things at home and creating things. I love to create things with my hands and crafting and cooking, and sometimes it's a lot of stuff that I don't pause and rest because I don't know about you, but I get that guilt too if I'm not productive. It's like this like interior feeling of like, oh, I'm resting. Okay, well, I should be doing something productive if I have a time to get this done.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely have felt that guilt before of just like, I feel like I should be doing something, but I don't have the energy to do something. So then I don't actually get enjoy when I try to rest because in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, I could be doing this, I could be doing that.
Yes, I completely agree. I'm like, man, I remember sitting on the couch and just being like, oh, I really should do my dishes. Oh, I really should do laundry. Oh, I should clean my house. But I'm exhausted and I don't want to do anything. But my exhaustion doesn't actually recuperate me. It's just like, my brain just like doesn't turn off.
Yeah, I have a hard time turning off my brain sometimes too. That's why I try to do other things to help distract my brain, but that doesn't help with like the doom scroll type of thing.
Completely, I understand. So let's dive into what the word has to say about rest, because like obviously you and I both struggle. So let's learn together and what that looks like. So I'll let you dive in.
Yeah, so the first verse that I wanted to talk about when we were talking about rest was Genesis chapter 2, verses 2 through 3, which says, "And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all of his work that he had done in creation." And I wanted to talk about this verse specifically because on the seventh day he created rest, and God didn't need a rest. Like he's
Mm-hmm.
all powerful. Like he didn't need a rest, but he created it for us because he knew what we were gonna be like and knew that all the busyness that was gonna happen. And so I just love that.
He created the entire world and still took a day to rest, to be an example of what it means to rest. It wasn't saying that he needed the rest. He just wanted to show that like this is possible and we're able to do this.
I definitely need that example. So very grateful for that. Is there anything else that like you think about when we talk about rest in the
Yeah,
Bible?
I do think about like what is actually like proper rest, if that makes sense. Like I I think that sometimes we rest, yeah, like taking a nap, doing these different things. Those are all very important. But what does actually resting the mind, body, and spirit look like? And I know in Matthew 11:28 through 30, it says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." And when I read that, I am just overwhelmed by the fact that, like, hey, Jesus is telling me to stop and give everything to him. His yoke is easy and his burden is light. I shouldn't be trying to hold the weight of the world, the expectations, the my job duties, my uh, persona with people around me. That shouldn't be on my shoulders. It should be given to him, and he will make my load light.
Yeah, I love this verse as well. I love that we can come to him and give him everything that's worrying us, everything that we're just stressed about,
Mhm.
and he can help us through it. And so it sounds like that Jesus is like the ultimate, like proper rest that you were talking about.
Mhm.
So in spending time with him,
Mhm.
that's when we can find proper rest.
Yeah.
Is there an example of like when you have done rest well and when maybe you have not done like
Yeah.
the best?
Well, I think where I'll start with maybe where I've not done rest as well, like at least what I hope to, and it really for me boils down to like three different things. So the first thing I do is I just don't rest and I just go 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 go. I don't actually offer myself the opportunity to rest. Two, it's when I do rest, it is the doom scroll or it is the just vegging out where I don't actually do anything that's actually recuperating and filling my cup again. It's just existence. I don't even know how to explain the word for that. But and then thirdly is just feeling guilty for resting. Like that overwhelming feeling of guilt that I'm like missing something. I'm not being the best wife possible. I'm not being the best friend possible because I'm like, ugh, I'm not knowing how to rest properly. So I'm not able to let those things go.
Yeah, for me, I forget to like go to Jesus
Mm-hmm.
first. And so that's when I find myself tired because like in that verse we were just talking about, was it in Matthew?
Matthew.
Yeah, in Matthew, like come to Jesus
Mhm.
first, and then I sometimes don't do that. So I try to do it by myself, and then I get so exhausted. And yeah, it's just very interesting because I just don't leave myself room for like
Mhm.
having that time with him of reading his word and in prayer. And like you were talking about too, like as a proper rest, like I have those times when I am doing something to like recharge myself, but it's not like the ultimate recharge, if that makes sense, of like
Yeah.
a proper rest of like coming to Jesus.
I know something I do though positively to help encourage rest, because this is a work in progress. So don't hear me say that like, yeah, I got to figure it out. Like I am 100% challenging myself. I have people around me that challenge me on rest too, who are like, hey, how are you doing? How are you resting? I can think of someone at work who always asks me, hey, are you resting well? And I'm like, thank you for telling me I need to do this. I need to make sure I rest well. But one of those ways I do that is I call slow mornings. Like I call it slow mornings for me, and it's where I'm very intentional with like not rushing out the door, making sure I get up earlier enough, make sure I don't snooze my alarm too many times, but really take the moment to just like enjoy the moment and enjoying the morning, whether it's through a devotional, through prayer, through drinking a cup of coffee outdoors, enjoying the creation that God's created for us, and just like not having that sense of rush or anxiety to get to the next spot. And I have found when I have more slow mornings in the week, I am a better person for those around me. I can be a witness to those around me. And I just value those times specifically. And if it can't happen in the morning, I'll find it at night. But oh my goodness, that's been where the rest has been influential for me.
I really like that you have like those slow mornings because you're still doing something. And for me, sometimes when I think of rest, I'm like, okay, I have to do absolutely nothing. Kind of like you were talking about earlier of like that vegetation state. I don't know what
Yeah,
the right word
I know. I don't know
either.
a good word for it.
But like when you're like doing nothing, kind of like bed rotting. I think that's what I'm
Yes.
thinking of. But you were still doing something in your slow mornings, but it sounded like when you took time to not like have to rush is when you're like, okay, kind of found peace, and then you could do your time in the Word. And I think kind of the busyness culture plays into that of just like you have so many things to do and you want to get it all done in the day that it kind of creates you to be anxious and like, okay, I gotta get this done, gotta get this done, and you're also thinking about all the other things you have to get done.
Yeah.
And so just like taking a breath and slowing down and just kind of enjoying. Sometimes you may not be doing something you enjoy, but like just like
Yes.
not having to cause yourself to be so anxious.
Yeah, it's just amazing. Like you can actually take that moment to just breathe. And that's where I felt just again recharged and recuperated.
Yeah, so for me, I'm also still trying to learn rest and what that looks like for me, especially with so much of like my season and life changing constantly. But yeah, like I said, I feel like I'm good at resting and like doing hobbies that I like, of like reading or like
That's
playing games
good.
with my family. But sometimes I like forget to like actually know what proper rest is, and that's spending time with Jesus. And even when I'm like busy as well, I still need to remember to create that time of rest, whether it's the morning or the evening,
Yeah.
because I just feel so tired
Yeah.
still. So yeah, I think that for me as well. I'm still learning, still growing.
Of course. I think this is a problem for everybody. It's not just me and you. I think our listeners probably have those moments too where um can they even find a moment to rest? Like I'm sure like for me, like when I'm listening to podcast, I am on the road trying to like fit in everything I can. But like I hope they hear us say like rest is important and it's okay you're not perfect at it now, but let's make steps to ensure that you're recuperating, recharging well, and that's coming to him and he will give you rest, like it said in Matthew.
Yeah, I love that. And so we talked about how we're still growing, and part of our podcast as well is where we get to invite mentors in and come sit with them and have a conversation as we can learn so much wisdom. And so we are going to talk with one of our mentors in this ministry about what rest looks like for her.
Hey guys, I'm so excited to introduce you guys to JM. She's all the way over from the East Coast and she's joining us here today in studio to talk about rest. So, hey, welcome. Glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So I have so many questions. Well, 3 questions. I'm not going to pick your brain too long, but I do want to hear a little bit. We're speaking about rest and what that means. So in your own words, what does rest mean and how did that look like for you?
For me, rest it's about recharging. It's about regaining like a capacity to function well. And I think for me, as I've gotten older, I've realized it's not only about stillness. For me, it's a lot about quiet, things that I do to kind of curb the background noise.
Yeah. I hear you saying like you're more focused on like how do I feel recharged from that time? Because I'm sure, are you pretty busy? Like I'm guessing back home and everything like that. So it's hard to find those moments to make sure we are fully recharged. So how do you prioritize that? I know as we're speaking to the next generation of women, it's like we're trying to be involved in every little thing right now. So how are you prioritizing that for yourself?
Well, I think the first thing I had to do was learn how to say no.
That's good.
And
that's good.
You know, understand that it was okay to say no. That it didn't mean I was being mean. And that if people felt let down, that I had to kind of let them manage that part. I think that was my first thing that I realized. I think another thing in order to prioritize rest is to find the time. So like I get up earlier. Yeah. Like I have a quiet house in the morning and that's a really good time for me. And I'm also a right after work. I give myself like a 30-minute timer to kind of sit in a hammock, play with the dogs, just things that don't involve technology
Mhm.
or my phone or even really having to talk to another person at that point.
I definitely relate to the no. Like, I like to say that I'm a yes ma'am kind of thing, where I'm like, yes, I'm ready to say it. So it's okay to say no to situations, and it's not wrong to say no. So as we kind of wrap up our time together, what advice would you give to those who are figuring this out? Like, how can we make it a priority?
Well, I think, no is a complete sentence. I think that's the first thing to practice. I think the second thing to prioritize is what is it that recharges your batteries? I think a lot of us are under the assumption that rest is having to do with stillness, but I think everybody's different. So I think for some people, rest can still be an activity of sorts if it kind of recharges your batteries, if you can draw and refill energy from it. I don't think it necessarily has to be completely quiet and still. But I also think that for women, I think we hold a lot of responsibility. I think we're often asked to hold a lot of responsibility. So I really think learning how to say no is the first step in showing that you prioritize rest.
Wow, I think that I never really thought about it that way, that sometimes rest can be different. It's just actually about recharging your battery, so you can be your best self when you walk out into the world. And it doesn't have to be, I think that when I think of rest as stillness, so I don't think about that, hey, it can be an activity, it can be something. So I hope
for me,
yeah,
a long walk can actually recharge me, even though it's an activity.
Yeah, you mentioned a hammock. I was like, ooh, that sounds amazing now.
Yes.
A hammock that just be able to enjoy the outside and the outdoors. And man, there's such great benefits of just being outdoors in general too, around that as well. So thank you so much, JM. This was amazing. I hope those listening really learned from this. But I appreciate you coming in. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
So we just talked to JM Huey just really about that rest aspect, and wow, my eyes were definitely opened to some things that she said. And I think my biggest takeaway was talking about boundaries. Like, I never thought about it in that way, that not only to create time for rest, you need to create those boundaries as well and find a place for that. What about you, Janae?
Yeah, I think that's probably where I get myself in trouble. Boundaries are hard for me because I'm non-confrontational and I hate having to like maybe disappoint people. And I also thought it was funny that she said no is a complete sentence. I don't know why. I think that's just like no is just like to the point. And you
No,
don't,
period.
yeah, and you don't even have to like add extra fluff. Like sometimes I do like, oh no, sorry, like I have this to do and this to do. I feel like you could just
Finding excuses so they don't make you feel bad for saying no.
yeah, but that's kind of where I get in trouble, is like not setting boundaries for myself and not saying no, because again, I feel like I'm going to disappoint people. And I think part of that though for me, and just having my season of burnout and getting to sit and talk with mentors as well about just everything that happened there, I found out that I actually was projecting. And so I was just assuming that people wanted me to be involved in everything and do all this X, Y, and Z. But technically no one ever said that. So it was just me assuming that. And so that's why I got in trouble of like me being I'm so non-confrontational. I hate it so much, and something I'm trying to work on so much of like not disappointing people. And like it's okay to like put yourself first sometimes. Like want to be wary with that. But like you really do have to like take that time to recharge.
Well, it makes me think of like how Jesus, he would step away and pray. Like when he was doing his ministry, like he had to step away and rest and pray and be in the Word. So it's okay to like that no. We had a one mentor tell us before too, is that what you say yes to, what are you actually saying no to? So it's like, man, yeah, I'm saying yes to this commitment that you ask of me, but now I'm saying no to maybe like to my time in the Word, or saying no for just some time to catch up on something. So it's like, what is your yes now telling you no to? And it's like to think about those things. Like it's okay to set those boundaries around you.
Yeah, and when you were talking about like even Jesus had to step away and pray, that kind of made me think about like what I was talking about earlier, just to clarify more of like it's okay to put yourself first sometimes, and of just like if you're giving and not filling your own cup, like you have nothing more to give. And so I've seen like analogies of like you're pouring in like this of anyways, but like you getting poured into is when you're spending time with Jesus. And then that's when your cup is full, and then you can go ahead and like give that to other people.
Yeah.
But if you're just gonna give out and not like have your cup refilled by Jesus, then it's just like you're gonna get burnt out. Like you have
I
nothing
know.
to give, is what I think is a more clarifying picture of
Yeah,
putting
that's so
yourself
good.
aside.
I like that a lot. Do you feel like right now, like how do you feel like right in this moment? Do you feel good about saying no now, or do you feel like you're still kind of learning this process and creating boundaries?
I'm definitely still learning boundaries and process. So, for example, I literally just got a dog. Funny because we talked about me wanting a dog earlier in one of our intro episodes. But I had to, because of him being a puppy, I had to be like, hey, I'm sorry, but I can't serve as much as I was doing. And I felt so bad. And I was like, I'm sorry. And then one of my mentors there was just like, don't say sorry. Like, this is like new season you're in. Like, I've been wanting this dog for a while, and it's like part of my family now. So I was like, okay, definitely still working on like it's okay to say no.
Yes. I know, like I'm still working on it as well because I am very grateful for there's some people in my life who kind of like call me out on it. My husband being one, people at work, people at church who are just like, hey, like, how are you doing? Are you pausing? Are you resting? Are you giving yourself time? Because they can also tell, like, one, I will get sick pretty quickly if I'm not taking time for myself to rest and recuperate. My body will go down. It's like my body stops me because my mind won't stop, but my body will stop me. And I'm just so grateful for having people who speak life into me about finding those boundaries. But I'm still learning how to like also advocate for myself. Hey, I do have to say no to this because if I say yes to you, I'm saying no to something else.
Yeah, something that helped me with learning my like boundaries is I had to sit down with a mentor and talk about what my personal values were. And so
That's
I
good.
didn't really have like established ones like in my brain. And so for me, it was like my family, my alone time, and then my life group. And I had had a reason for each one because that means it like actually matters. And then she told me, now that you have your personal values, every time someone asks you to do something, you should filter it through those values. And if it conflicts with it, say no.
Yeah.
And so that helped me so much. I'm still working
Yeah.
on it. But that helped me so much just to put it in perspective and like actually have it written down. And I can see, okay, these things are really what's most important to me. And so when I don't have these things in my life is when I start getting tired as well.
That's true. That's so good. So we've talked a lot. We've heard from a mentor. We talked about our experiences. So what advice, Janae, would you give someone who is actually mentoring somebody towards knowing how to properly rest?
I think it's just loving them where they're at and kind of what we talked about earlier. There's different seasons that you're in. Sometimes you might be super busy and doing a lot of different things. And sometimes you have that more flexibility of having more time to rest. So I think it's really just helping the person kind of just see where they can incorporate it into their schedule because they may not know, like, I have this to do and this to do. And something that you actually helped me out with was time blocking of just like this, okay, from this time to this time is when you're doing this. And you talked about incorporating flexibility so you're not set in stone on those times. And that's helped me a lot too. So I think really just trying to figure out where you're at right now in your season and incorporating a rest time in there and some flexibility as well.
That's good. I would say I would kudos that as well. Like, hey, like those are the things I would do as well if I were a mentor. But also like explain rest to people what it actually means. I think that's where maybe my earlier years struggled a lot with rest because I didn't know what it actually meant. Like, okay, I'm gonna go take a nap. Like, I would feel better after my nap, but I was like not. But I wasn't actually rested. Like my mind wasn't rested, my soul wasn't rested. Like my body might have been physically rested, but the rest of me didn't actually rest in those time periods. So when a mentor taught me how to like, what does rest actually mean? When I dove into the word of what rest actually meant, that's when I could actually benefit from it. So if you're someone who's mentoring another person who is struggling with this, who has struggled with creating boundaries, like sit down and talk about it. Just like your mentor talked about your values, like just take that moment and pause and teach them, hey, what is your boundary? What matters to you most? What commitments mean the most to you that you want to always honor? And what are commitments that you're like just saying yes to because you don't want people to think poorly of you? And almost creating that example. And I'm big on role playing too. The people I get a mentor at work probably will, if they're listening to this, probably will laugh because I make them role play all the time on, hey, role play. If someone comes to you and goes, hey, Janae, do you want to do this? How do you say no? Like, we would practice it. It feels awkward, but give them the time to practice and do those kind of things. But to wrap that up, I would also just say, lead by example. If you're a mentor, are you resting? Are you making sure that you're taking care of yourself too? Making sure you lead by example so that you can show those that you do mentor that it is possible and you are able to do it.
Yeah, I love that. I think what I heard from you too, and I think this would be like my one like big takeaway from all of this, is we've talked about so much about rest and from busyness, but I think there's like rest for your body, and then there's a rest for your soul.
Yes.
And so I think knowing that difference is really good, because like I think for me, rest for my body is like recharging in like my bed, like laying down, reading, something like that. But I think rest for my soul is when I get to go to Jesus and spend time with him and give him everything that is just worrying me in my life right now.
That's good. What would you say for those maybe like dealing with rest? What do you think? What's the takeaway they should take from here?
I think setting boundaries is good. I agree with that. I don't want to go too much into that because we talked about that a lot, but I really do think learning boundaries and learning how to say no is something that everyone should learn.
Yeah. How do you think they can honor God in that?
That's a very good question. I think. Oh, I'm trying to think now. That you put me on this spot. Honoring God in setting boundaries and saying no. I think really knowing what is good for you and like what to say no to. Because like some things like I want to say no because I don't want to do it, but it's actually good for me. And I think just having people in your life to kind of help you, like, oh, I think this would be really good for you, and you're just like trying to make excuses of like, no, I don't want to do this because I'm busy. But I think really just like, are you saying no because you need that rest with him, or are you saying no because you just don't want to do it?
Yeah. I want to like circle back to, like, we talked about Genesis, we talked about the verse in Matthew, and that God calls us to rest in him. He calls us to dwell in his presence. And I want to make sure like people know that if you're dealing with this, like go to him, come to him. And like you said, to honor God in that, like create the boundaries. You do have to create those boundaries. You do have to say no, because sometimes it's finished. The time is done. Like I need to say no in this instance to ensure that I'm spending my time wisely. Because I know for me, sometimes the busyness is rooted in pride. Like I'm just proud of what I do and I'm proud of like what I can accomplish, but let go of that pride. Let go of the pride. That way, what I complete and what I can do is not for the glory of, it needs to be for the glory of him, not for the glory of me. And so finding rest creates that for me where I'm like, hey, pause. Like, what am I doing? Am I doing it for myself or am I doing it for him?
Yeah, I love that. I feel like that summarizes better what I was trying to say. So
Same page.
Thank you for that. Guys, thank you so much for taking time to listen today and consume content, whether you're listening or watching. We are just so grateful for you tuning in.
Be sure to check us out at Built Up Ministries, at Built Up Ministries on our Instagram, and then builtup.org to keep up to date on newsletters, upcoming podcasts, and weekly content.
Thank you guys. Bye.
Thank you for joining us for today's podcast episode. To learn more about Built Up Ministries or the Girl Listen Up podcast, head to www.builtup.org.